Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming today and being with us. We are Irena and Gayatri, members of the Indigenous Literatures Lab from Boise at the University of Toronto, led by our director, Dr. Katherena Vermette. Some of the goals of the Indigenous Literatures Lab are uplifting the voices of Indigenous authors, advancing anti-colonial and resurgence frameworks, and affirming strength-based engagements when teaching Indigenous literatures.
As a lab, we are truly excited to present to you today's event, Becoming Good Relatives, Honoring Humanity Within Indigenous Literatures. This event has been made possible with the support of Another Story Bookshop and the Indigenous Education Network. Please join us in thanking them for their ongoing support.
After the conversation and the Q&A session, we encourage you to help yourself to some refreshment and visit our vendors. Another Story Bookshop has brought books written by our two wonderful speakers and authors that are available for purchase. And we have vendors that are selling some lovely beadwork, Devo and Alicia. So we're looking forward to having some time to do that. If you are interested in learning more about the Indigenous Literatures Lab and attending future events, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and be sure to sign up for our email list if you haven't already done so. There's a sign-up sheet at the front. You'll see some little posters around with some of our handles for Instagram and Facebook, and a link to our newly developed website.
So when you also came in, you received a key card. So please feel free to jot down questions you may have for our panelists. Members of the lab will collect the cards partway through the event, and we will select a few for our moderators to ask during the Q&A session. We now welcome Grandmother Shirley, Boise Indigenous Education Network's elder in residence and traditional knowledge keeper, to provide a traditional opening. Grandmother Shirley is Turtle Clan and a registered member of the Alderville First Nation. Her mother was born into her father's family, the Grays, and she was raised in the Alderville community. Shirley's maternal grandmother was from Six Nations, with her lineage through Tainanaga and Oneida. Shirley has worked within the community for several decades, specific to program development and implementation to honor one's individual and familial journey on the path of inherent good minds, life wishes, bundle reclamation. She holds in her heart bundle an immense love for all familial and community circles. Please welcome Grandmother Shirley.
Thank you, Gayatri and Katherena. Thank you so much for that. I'm simply calling myself now Aubrey woman. I don't know if I'm a knowledge keeper or knowledge carrier, just somebody who is the sum of my life experiences. So I just wanted to say to everybody tonight, thank you for being so very, very well today. As I look out here, I'm sort of flooded with stories that are coming back to me just from being in this very building alone like that. So Bidam and Nemki Kwadishnikov, Shikento Demal, Milton Shibah. And these lovely sisters identified where I come from, and I'm so very proud of that. The whole that lineage through Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee people. So I want to do a little story for you here, just to start out here, okay? Then I want you to guess who the author is, okay? All that we are is story, from the moment we are born to the time we continue on our spirit journey. We are involved in the creation of the story of our time here. Is what we arrive with, is what we all leave behind. We are not the things we accumulate. We are not things we deem important. We are story, all of us. What comes to matter is the best possible story we can while we're here, you, me, all of us together. When we can do that, we take the time to share those stories with each other. We get bigger inside. We see each other. We recognize our kinship. We change the world one story at a time. Who said that? Who wrote that? What do you think? Tell me. Say it again. Exactly, Brother Richard. So yes, give her a hand. And you know, I found Richard a long time ago through a settler teacher, and he has meant so much to me. And story is so deep within this building here as well. I feel a kinship to Richard, and I keep bringing it back all the time when I speak because we have the same sort of history. Our story is the same, being removed from your family, finding your family. This very building here that we are in, who knows that it was a Bible college a long time ago? Who knows that? It was a Bible college a long time ago. Clayton, sure, Brother Clayton is sitting over here. I knew him since he was a child. And so many things happened in this building. So my story, when you reconnect with your family, it's not always what you think it's going to be. So it was like an 11-year journey. But when I found this place after and still my 11-year journey with my family, this building, this very spirit of this building was here for me. It helped me to reconnect, to start storing my own life again like that, which helped me along the way to do those reconnections like that. We have so many incredible Indigenous storytellers, story makers. This is the story of our lives here, and this is what brings us together. And I truly believe in my heart that far too long we've heard all the negative things that are wrong with our people. But as I got older, I turned 77 this year, what I've come to understand, even in my own childhood, there are those gems, those moments in there when your family, even though there were challenges, there was lots of big love and there was lots of laughter in there, always in there like that. So these two wonderful sister authors here tonight have come here to grace us with their stories, their presence, enjoying them. They're here and what they're bringing here. What my family always says is that big love like that. They brought that big love. Two powerful Métis sisters. Give them a hand. And I just want to say always to the most beautiful Saint Guadis, so that what sets everything in motion. We say Yahweh for coming and sitting in our hearts today. It's always to the most beautiful Saint Guadis, so that what sets everything in motion. That invitation is always there. We send our love out to the world. There's so much that's happening right now. The prophecies are coming to fruition. We are holding the light here. Thank you for holding the light and coming to the space. Yahweh.
Thank you, Grandmother Shirley. Now we will introduce to you our moderators for today's event, Jasmine Rice and Dr. Jennifer Brandt. Jasmine is a member of the Indigenous Literatures Lab and doctoral student in the Department of Curriculum, Teaching, and Learning at Boise University of Toronto. Her research focuses on the relationship between Indigenous language learning and cultural identity. She is a secondary languages and social studies educator looking to merge these experiences with her background as a oh my gosh, I'm sorry, as a Ganingihaga student and language learner. I hope I did okay. She is motivated by the Indigenous Languages Reformation movement and sees language learning as a critical component of cultural identity.
I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Jennifer Brandt, who is an associate professor in the Department of Curriculum, Teaching, and Learning at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. She belongs to the Ganingihaga Mohawk Nation, with family ties to Six Nations of the Grand River Territory and Tyendinaga Mohawk Territory. Her research focuses on Indigenous maternal pedagogies as living praxis, and she has been recognized with the 2023 Canadian Association of Curriculum Studies Outstanding Publication in Curriculum Studies Award for her article entitled Confronting Colonial Violence in and Out of the Classroom, Advancing Curricular Modes Towards Justice to Indigenous Maternal Pedagogies. Dr. Brandt is a current faculty co-chair of the Indigenous Education Network and the founding director of the Indigenous Literatures Lab. Her publications include the edited collection, Rematriating Justice, Honoring the Lives of Our Indigenous Sisters, which was released in 2024, and Forever Loved, Exposing the Hidden Crisis of Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls in Canada, which was released in 2016. Dr. Brandt teaches courses on Indigenous methodologies, Indigenous literatures, and structural and colonial violence in education. Her work on Indigenous maternal praxis has made significant contributions across the field of education, sociology, and women and gender studies. So we will now turn it over to Jasmine and Dr. Brandt, as well as invite our panelists to come up. Please.
Sego bueno. I was just told how to use the mic and I already forget. So I hope you can all hear me. I'm very delighted to be here. This is one of our first events as part of the Indigenous Literatures Lab, and so honored to have our panelists with us today, who Jasmine is going to introduce in a moment. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about what Indigenous literatures mean to me, what these wonderful Métis scholars' work has meant to me, and the intention for developing the Indigenous Literatures Lab. So the Indigenous Literatures Lab is something that's been in development, but just developed in 2024, so it's fairly new. And the intention is for a space where we can share in our love of Indigenous literatures. We're specifically focusing on young adult literatures with some of the moves that we see in secondary schools across English language arts, and introduce courses like the Ontario First Voices course, which is an Indigenous literatures course which replaces English courses. And we see other shifts like this in other provinces across Canada. And so I'm wondering, how many teachers do we have in the room? Maybe if I could just, amazing. And so part of the intention of the lab is to provide a space that brings all of us who love Indigenous literatures together, Indigenous community together in space with English language arts teachers. Some of our events will be at Boise, but some of our events will be here, right? Because it's also about sharing knowledge in community spaces. So I want to talk a little bit about what Katherena Vermette's work has meant to me, and reading The Break. So when I read The Break, I actually started reading The Break in Niagara. I brought The Break with me to Cuba. So I have an image of me, on the beach with The Break, but I didn't finish The Break until I moved to Winnipeg. And I feel like that was meant to be, right? Because I had this deeper understanding. I was walking and I could see the street names that, oh, that's the street that's in The Break, or, oh, and like imagining some of the places, what The Break actually was. And there's a particular space in Winnipeg that I imagine Katherena Vermette was writing about. And so I've been teaching The Break in different classes. And we had a lunch and learn earlier today and a bit of a chance to talk about the way characters resonate with all of us in different ways. And a student that I had last year, I'm not going to mention who the student is at the moment, but she wrote this beautiful reflection paper of The Break. And she said, naming some of the characters, that's my cousin, that's my friend's cousin, that's my sister. Right? And so the way that these characters truly resonate, Dan Million talks about felt theory, right? And the way that these characters and the beautiful storytelling resonates and is felt. I laugh when I'm reading Vermette's work, I cry, right? Like there's so many emotions, so just beautiful. And Aubrey Jean Hanson's work just resonates so much. There's a part in one of her books, sorry if I'm saying stuff that you're gonna say later, but where she talks about being like in third year undergrad, the first time coming across Indigenous literature as an assigned reading. I had the same experience, third year undergrad. And it was the late Patricia Monteiro-Aes's work. And it just, inspired me in ways that I can't even put into words, and inspires the work that I do now. So I'm going to stop because I'm rambling. But Yahweh Boa, so delighted to have you all here, and I look forward to future events that we have with the lab as well. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Jasmine Rice, who is going to introduce our panelists.
Hi everyone, I'm Jasmine. I work in the Indigenous Literatures Lab with delightful Dr. Brandt, and it's such a pleasure to be here. So I'll start by introducing Dr. Aubrey Jean Hanson, who is a member of the Ottawa-Hemiswak Métis government and associate professor at the University of Calgary's Workeland School of Education, where she serves as the director of Indigenous education. Aubrey works in the areas of curriculum studies and Indigenous education. She's the author of Literatures, Communities, and Learning, Conversations with Indigenous Writers, which we have at the back of one of our vendors there. Presently, she is the president of the Indigenous Literary Studies Association, planning their annual gathering for Congress 2025. Please consider joining ILSA as a member if you would like to support Indigenous literatures. Katherena Vermette is a Mission Red River Métis writer from Treaty 1 territory, the heart of the Métis Nation in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. In 2013, her first book, North End Love Songs, won the Governor General's Literary Award for Poetry. Since then, her work has garnered awards and critical accolades across genres. Her novels The Break, The Strangers, and The Circle, and most recently Real Ones, have all been national bestsellers and won multiple literary awards. Her work for children and young adults includes the picture book The Girl and the Wolf, and graphic novel series A Girl Called Echo. She also co-wrote and co-directed This River, which won the 2017 Canadian Screen Award for Best Short Documentary. Her third book of poetry, Procession, will be out September 20th, 2025. Born in Winnipeg, her mission roots on her paternal side run deep in St. Boniface, St. Norbert, and beyond. Her maternal side is Mennonite from the Altona and Rosenfeld area. She holds a Master of Fine Arts from the University of British Columbia, an honorary doctorate of letters from the University of Manitoba, and Katherena lives with her family in a cranky old house within skipping distance of a temperamental Red River. Please give Katherena and Aubrey a very warm welcome.
Emma? Yeah, they trusted me with turning this on. I'm gonna Mr. Rogers. Hold again. You starting It's like my sweater. It's like you take off this weather especially. You take off your jacket, take off your sweater, you're cold again, you put back on your sweater. It's Mr. Rogers.
It's something very comforting that you just like start on that big street, just like inhale out again.
Should we sing?
Yes, yes, we should. I always joke that actually when anyone has me a microphone, I'm like, one of my jobs. This is not what we planned. This is not. Maybe I should start by saying we're so honored. Like I'm gonna actually talk first because she's the important guest. But we're very honored to be invited here to have a casual conversation, and that's what you're gonna get today. Like we have some key themes, and Katherena has some really smart things to say. But essentially, we were invited here to visit, and we're really excited about that. And so I'm going to tell a story that is not scripted, which is just that whenever I'm at a microphone, I'm tempted to sing because one of my earliest jobs was working in my dad's pool hall, and I had to keep the rowdy crowds calm by singing to them, which is great preparation for classroom teaching.
What did you sing?
What-
Rowdy Pool Hall?
Is this like a one microphone at a time situation? Because only mine is recording.
No, I'm not working. Ooh. You're on. I am on. Okay, I just have to be right here.
Hold it.
I'll see you right
here at the back.
Be right there. I would spit on that.
Oh, this one's better. Better. You have that one. What is
What did you sing? What did you sing at the Rowdy Pool Hall?
Hopelessly Devoted to You was my made Aubrey little news. Exactly that. Maybe we should. So we agreed we're going to start by introducing ourselves a bit longer. And I'm going to.
Oh, they might have touched you up.
Someone's coming. If you want to rely
It's-
or
I have the teacher voice. I'll project for you getting it. But and I'm going to make Katherena go second because she is the author here tonight. But I want to also say thank you, Miigwech Marcy, for the invitation to be here. It's really an honor to sit with one of my favorite writers in the known universe and have a conversation. That's really a privilege. Does that feel good if I go first? Because I'm building up to the main act.
Building up.
Yes, you're the main actor. So, Tanshi Kiwao, hi everybody. I would say Oki, Miss Tunatanku, Sisi Okumi. I was gifted a Blackfoot name, which I like to honor when I travel because I'm not Blackfoot. I do not speak Blackfoot, but I'm working on being a good relative in Blackfoot territory, which is where I come from. My Blackfoot name means Little Bird Talking. It was gifted to me by Pegani elder Reg Croshu, and I understand that he was raised in the Little Bird Society.
So I think my name is there to remind me that I'm a learner in a Blackfoot space, and also maybe to remind me that I need to help take care of Blackfoot learning spaces or spaces where Blackfoot language and knowledge can be honored. So I'm still learning what my name calls me to be responsible to, but I do like to say that in front of a crowd because it makes me nervous and just keeps me humble. But I am actually of Métis ancestry. I feel it was a big promotion to be named as a Michif's sister with Katherena Vermette today. That's very exciting. My mother's father's family comes from Swain, Breland, Dauphiné, Grant, Métis lines. So we still haven't sat down and kind of figured out exactly how we're cousins, but we probably are related. Definitely cousins, if not sisters. We said sisters. I'm keeping it. And I also have ancestry that extends back to various Euro settler communities, folks who migrated over to this land because of volcanic ash covering Iceland, or because of hunger, famine, war in various parts of the world. I come from German-speaking ancestry as well as French and a range of other kind of Euro settler diasporic travels. So I really grew up with that kind of a foot in both worlds awareness that I come from diverse peoples, and it feels love. So I'm just going to say one more thing, which is to add to the piece about me growing up not seeing myself reflected in what I was reading in school. I certainly did not encounter Métis writing in my elementary or high school education. That was something that I didn't get, as mentioned, until university. And I really was looking to story myself into the world. Like, I was a big reader. I was one of those kids who was like reading everything in the library. And I really latched on to books about Indigenous people, but there were never books by Indigenous people in the schools that I attended. And, I think I found other ways, other things to identify with. Like, I identified a lot with horse books, a very horsey kid and stuff like that. But I think it would have been pretty cool if I had encountered Indigenous literatures earlier, and let alone works by Métis writers. And honestly, I also had that experience of reading the break and being like, oh my gosh, like, I've never kind of seen my ancestors reflected back to me in literature in the way that I until now, until this moment. So certainly Katherena's writing has been really important to me. Reading A Girl Called Echo, I'm kind of like, man, I wish I'd had this stuff when I was in school. And just continuing that experience of reading your work and being in dialogue with you, literally and figuratively, has been really a huge gift. So I'm really honored to be here today next to, like I said, one of my favorite writers in the universe. And that's kind of enough about me, except I will mention that I did have a brief career as a high school English teacher. I also was one of those teachers who, they're like, do you think you could teach? And I was like, oh yes, I could, because I would like a job, please. So I taught a lot of other things as well: science, career, life management, German language, English as a second language, things like that. I just love young people. I love teaching. I kind of miss the high school classroom, but I now get to teach teachers as well. So in the Bachelor of Education program. So I hope to try to inspire educators to work with Indigenous literatures and the work that they do, because I think story can be a really beautiful relational pathway to that deeper learning of decolonizing educational systems, stored in a relational way in. And so I'm also really excited to be hearing the folks at the Indigenous Literatures Lab who are doing that kind of work in parallel. So it's that's kind of my extended intro. We wanted to make sure we situated ourselves, and I just, as someone who grew up in an urban setting, kind of when I was younger, like apart from Métis community, having reconnected across, literatures, and then finding like real life community out in the world beyond books, it's been a really powerful experience to find that path. So that's enough about me. I'll pass it to our real author of the day.
The real one. The real list is really good now. Is it a back and forth? Is it a echo evening? Okay, we got it. I'm incredibly casual whenever I come and talk with people, and I like to make lots of jokes, particularly at my expense. But that is not to take away from the gravity of what we'll probably end up talking about. I'm just extremely sarcastic. So we did want to speak first to situate ourselves, because when you talked about the theme becoming good relatives, I hope we are good relatives, not just becoming them. But the first and most important thing to do is to situate yourself so you know how everyone is related, you know where you come from. So the term I was taught was Nidenoy Naganak, which means all line relations. And so we hear that, and to situate that, we introduce ourselves traditionally and extensively. So I will say, Kansai, Hani, Chikwanapana Pradishnakas, Sangi Davawik, Sangi Gavawik, Medina Dishnakas, Megisi Dodam, Winnipeg, Riviera-Rouge, Michif, Nidinjabal, Nidila Nagarana. So what I just said there in the Nidinjaboy is my names. I welcome two names. My clan, which is Eagle Clan, and the place I come from, which is Winnipeg. My people have been in and around Winnipeg for as long as, and even before there was a Winnipeg. My family relations on my father's side are Michili. They have been since they were recorded of that nature. And I'm related to Ravennis and Rivarles and Bullets and St. Germain's and St. Denis and Chances are and Chile. We're related because that's how big Catholic families worked. And yeah, we've also been around St. Norbert, St. Boniface, City of Tal, but also as far into Saskatchewan as Ilda the Pass. And on my mother's side, on my maternal side, I am Mennonite, completely. And now for something completely different, Mennonite, which also means if you're Mennonite, chances are we're cousins. My mother's name was Friesen. I'm also related to Weaves. It is okay. Up here, it feels really loud when I'm here. Okay.
Yeah, it's only about
It's only loud. It's right there. Okay. No, that's okay. I'm glad to be able to be heard. So I'm Mennonite on my mom's side from Altonta and Roosevelt areas. My relatives on that side are Friesens and Weaves and Dewicks and Schraders and Newfells. So in doing that, we know not only who we're related to, but we're really just kind of putting ourselves on maps and interconnecting in these grand webs that we all live in order to, not only find out who we're related to, which is, handy when dating, but also to know, how we are like, because no matter what, no matter where we come from, no matter where, our people come from, we are so very alike in so many different ways, not only blood relations. So, yeah, that's why we wanted to do that way. And it's always nice. It's always grounding. I always feel very humble when I share my names and I share my relatives and really know where and why I'm doing this for.
And I think also that introduced, how's this first sound? Are we good? Thumbs up in the back row? Yeah, all right. It is loud. That's good. We're coming across bold. I think and that might be a nice place to kind of start the dialogue, the notion of relationality, humility. I've been reading your work all along. And actually we have the chance, I want to mention too, the book at the back. Someone said Aubrey is the author of the book at the back. And I'm like, my book is actually all these authors that I got to speak with. So there's the authors in the book are the people I got to speak with. But we did an interview for that book 10 years ago. And we realized when we're meeting to prepare for this session, we're like, 10 years, no way, because it feels like about 20 minutes about that. So it's kind of cool to get to see how much more you've written, the work that you've done. But one of the things that, speaking of relationship and where we come from and being humble, one of the things that's always struck me in your work is the notion, I think of Daniel Justice writes about kinship being an action, or it's it's not just a static state, like that we're related, but that it's something we do, like that we have responsibilities. And I feel like your work for me is always storying these people, and often women, who show me what it looks like to be a good relative, like to act out love, not just to feel love, but to like be love, to enact love. And I was wondering if you could just say a little more about that, whether it's something that you think about putting in there on purpose, or something like it's a theme that you're exploring, or experiences that you're trying to dig into, but just that, like being a good relative or enacting love through relationship. Can you just like talk about that for a bit?
I will try to talk about that for a bit. I will check in on my volume first and foremost, because that, yeah, okay, we're good. Okay, it's really loud up here. I can't tell. I really want to like start thrash metal bands or something, because where is that? What's decibel level? You'd make an awesome thrash metal band.
Well, we can both sing.
I can't sing, though. I will say, I was gonna say, whenever I get one of those like little mics on the ear, I will sing Britney Spears. Like, and it's, oops, I did it again. And then you like kind of dance, and I can't dance either. So, this one I'm not so. I wonder what song I would sing. What's the karaoke song? I think it's Tracy Chapman.
Let me to find out.
Okay, anyway, thrash metal band aside, to the serious question. I do think in terms of, I really live by the philosophy, it sounds really awful. I live by but it's true, that love is a verb. You know, that love is not something that, like, it is a feeling, it is like this, kind of, state, but it's also something we have to do. And we're not just here, for our own shits and giggles, we're actually here to do a work. And sometimes that is taking care of each other. Sometimes it's taking care of ourselves, because that's the most important thing we're supposed to do. But there's always action, Any elder I had the pleasure of being taught by, who I regard as my most important teacher. So I've had I've been gifted with many, many teachers. It's the idea of your life's purpose is finding your gift. And then your gift is your purpose, but that is to serve, like, whomever, your family, your community, your nation, whatever. And I really take that work seriously. Not that we're, that I get to walk around and say and claim my nation, the Métis Nation, but also that they claim me, not out of the goodness of their heart, but because I am a community member, and because when I say that, it doesn't mean I get privileges and rewards and stamps. And honestly, we don't get that many. Michif people don't. All the other guys, they get all the good stuff. We didn't get treaty, we didn't get land. I'm just kidding. The genocide was spread around. It wasn't, shits and giggles. I'm gonna say that. Because it gives me joy to swear. But no, it's not a privilege to be able to say that. It's a responsibility. I'm here to not to toe the line and agree with all my politicians and do all this. Like we get to have different opinions. We get to have different, spiritual belief systems. We get to be different because we're a whole big group of people. But we do have a responsibility to serve in whatever way that it speaks to us, whatever our gift has been given. I don't know that writing is a gift. I think it's something I've worked really hard at. I've dedicated my life to story because I do believe in story. I think it's the best way we learn anything, and it's the only place I really want to be at the end of the day, and that's why I'm a writer. Not, that I get to sell books and make money of this. That is my privilege. But I'm here because I really like it. And my purpose in doing that is then to somehow assert in whatever way. So that means my characters have to be authentic. That means I can't, tell, broad-faced lies about things. I can't pretend to know something I don't know. And there's so many things I don't know. I mean, sometimes I do kind of pretend that I know things I don't know. And I see how I can get away with it. But that's mostly just, fiction. That's the whole fiction thing. But no, I mean, there is, you can't just, you can't do one thing. It is always action, no matter what. And we all have our own gifts, our own things that we can do in that way.
And thank you. You've given me like 6 different avenues I want to chase down. And I'm very excitable and a little neurosparkly. So I'm like, ooh, so many questions. But I have a question for you. I guess like one of the things you just said made me think about, sorry for the buzzing. There. Perfect balance. We like one of the things that the aunties do in your books is like, and I know people in responding to your work, like I'm thinking of the break and other texts, like they're very interested in how you write about trauma or things that move across generations. And like while like the break might not be a beach read, as we were talking about earlier in the day. I can understand why you started it in one place and finished it in another. And I've done the same thing. Like, I can't remember which Sarah Waters book I took on vacation, but I'm like, this is very dark. It's not a beach read. But it's a really, like, there is more in that book than trauma. And I think that's something, there's a really important insistence to be made. Like, I know when I was reading it and thinking about that book, I've actually never taught that text because I actually don't teach in literature classes anymore. I teach mostly like in educational, like I teach Indigenous Ed 101 kind of classes. But I know if I were teaching it, I would really want to insist with my students, actually like there's something really beautiful happening in this book. Like look at what these aunties are doing. Look how people are showing up to support each other. And there's more that moves across the generations than just trauma. And of course, I'm very interested in not being defined by my trauma. I'm very interested in being seen as a whole person, somebody like I've got a sense of humor and my family is extremely hilarious. Like we take some of our darkest stuff and spin some beautiful relational gold out of that. And I'm wondering if you could just reflect on that moment of like, I guess that love as an action anti-power of like stopping certain things from moving across the generations, or maybe like doing our best to, turn to the shits and giggles and away from the dark. Because I don't know, like, you kind of know what I'm getting at. Okay.
I got it. I'll talk about the break, and because I think I really had this like epiphany while I was writing the break, and it's kind of gone over to my other work since, because it's been almost 10 years since that book came out, which is ridiculous to me. Just like it was 10 years ago that we had that conversation. This time does not exist. But when I was writing the break, I really wanted to write a novel. I had no idea how to write a novel. And I had like this idea, this kind of seed that was like kind of like more of a, like an intrusive thought. It was a trauma. I won't do any kind of spoiling around the book, but it was an assault that happened, perpetrated on a young woman, and no one quite knows what's going on, and everyone's kind of trying to search. But I wanted the end of the book to be like the perpetrator is this person that we've already humanized. So it's not just a good guy, bad guy story. It's the story of someone who causes harm. It's the story of we all know this Buddhist adage, hurt people. It's the idea that these things don't happen in vacuums. And, they are not just evil people and good people in the world. Like there's evil actions perpetrated by people who inflict harm because harm has been done to them. And it was this really big, trauma. And it created this whirlwind. And of course, we have to talk about intergenerational effects. Of course, we have to talk about like intra-community violence and all of the other, not fun things. I come from an inner city neighborhood that is primarily like 70+% Indigenous. It's one of the poorest places in Canada, the 2 poorest postal codes in Canada. But it also is this beautiful community, just full of people that know and love each other. And I've never felt home until I was there. I moved there when I was 10 years old. And I stayed there the first time until I was 17. That's where, 10 to 17, my whole brain was built around that identity of being in this community that was looked down upon by everyone, but I loved with all my heart. These people that finally looked like me, because I'd previously been in neighborhoods where I was the only Indigenous person, and now I was suddenly the whitest kid in the room. It was wonderful. No, and it was very strange too, but it was my home. And that's what I wanted to talk about in my writing, and that's what I wanted to talk about in the break. But in doing that, you had to talk about the trauma. But I never wanted to stay in the trauma. I always tell the story, like there's lots of characters in the break. And I say the story that I kept writing, starting in the book, with one character, and then I get to the trauma, and I didn't want to write it. So I just made up a new character and started the process all over again until I had, I think, 10 characters, just circling around the bad stuff. But in doing that, that actually became what the book was about. It became about these characters who were loving and looking after each other. It became about how these aunties and glucones and moms knew how to help this girl. It became about that we already had the answer, to the trauma and how to solve the trauma and how to fix all the trauma, because we were all experts in how to do that, and of course, because we didn't just inherit trauma, we inherited incredible knowledge and strength and ingenuity and love. And so that was what that book became about. I didn't want it to be about the trauma. I didn't want it to be about what happened. I wanted it to be how it's cured. And that's kind of the formula. No formula person. As soon as I say that, I'm gonna break it apart for the next one, because I kind of fight against things like that. But that's kind of what I end up doing. I'm looking in my books for that magical piece of what's positive. I like to look at something that might be perceived as wrong or gritty. I get a lot of gritty. It's so gritty. She's so gritty. Or all of those street. She's so street. I'm not street at all. I'm totally street. I'm super tough. But all of those things, like looking at those relatives that we see that aren't looked at as whatever, and finding the beauty there, finding the strength there, because it's right fucking there. And it's just a matter of looking better.
Sorry, I just had to interject for a second. But you reminded me of so many favorite quotes from the break, but and I think it's the end, and it's just all these women holding each other up. And so it's so beautiful to hear you speak about that, because, and I know we both write about home place and home in the break, but for some of us, with that the intergenerational effects, reading these books is the healing, right? And so for some of us who don't have those women holding us up in our own families or in our own communities, is the characters in books like The Break who are those women that are holding us up. So I just had to share that.
Well, and who become home too.
Yes.
I have to think about, I know a lot of people have written about Métis and as not just being about a place, that kinship happens through story, or kinship happens through that, there's a lot of mobility among Métis people, and people, the relationships between people are also a form of home. And I really find that in your writing, that I'm obsessed with being about home in your work as well. It's such a prominent theme in literature. But I have to move my glasses for this. I was hoping to ask you a bit more about home. I loved this section. When I ran into this section in Real Ones, I was like, oh, it's like she wrote this for me, to think about home again. I love this. But I was hoping you could respond to this section and just say a little bit more about it in the new novel Real Ones. June is reflecting on home, like home is being different from like just the places that we've lived. And, you know, as long as I've been away, I've never called any other place home. I've mostly called the places I've lived places, apartments, houses, flats. I've said at home, I'm going home, but it was never home, not really. It was my place. And then she reflects back on, if I'm really honest, my real home is a rented duplex on Berkshire Bay. And then she talks about her relationship with her sister. And she says here, like home was where I tried my luck and fucked up and wrecked it all and made it worse. And that just, I found that whole section just so striking, impactful, and powerful. And of course, I know you don't want to give like spoilers of what's happening in the story, but this is hopefully a what's it, like a hook to get everybody to buy the book and read it. It's so good. Please buy this book. But can you just say more about that?
Yeah, thanks. That is, what can I say about that? That's June talking about who moved around a lot, and she's talking about home versus place. It is, I think, like, this is why English professor and education professor are so important, because I do talk about that a lot, and I kind of didn't think about that until today. Yeah, shit, okay. But it's true, and I think when I think about it, where it might come from in my own origin story, is I remember, I'm gonna credit my mom. She really likes me to credit her with stuff, so she's gonna love this. Because it was when my older kids were very little, and I had been moving around a lot. And I had, in my childhood, we moved around a lot. So I never wanted to bring that into my kids' lives. And so I was kind of guilty. And it was my mom who said, you're their home. And it was just that, like, yeah, we are each other's homes. It doesn't matter where we are. It doesn't matter where we stay. I mean, I lived with my older kids. We lived for many, many years in housing, a place I didn't want to go to, but ended up being the best place for us for so many years. And now I'm lucky enough, I've had one house for 10 years, which is the most I've ever had in my whole life. And I feel like such a grown up. Because we're just, we're settled in, and I don't want to move ever. Even though I really should, it's falling apart. But it is, the home becomes our relations. And it is for my family's kind of, I always say they lived in and around Winnipeg, but you know, traditionally we didn't ever stay in one place. We were always moving around in different places. We kind of had a home base, and there was a lot of hunting, whether it be the bison hunt. I have relatives, relations in my genealogy who, you know, were born one place, married one place, and die at the other place. You know, everybody, like, our territory extends, you know, 3 prairie provinces. We got around. So I wonder if I always think there's something very inherent in that we kind of wander. Some of us wander. I kind of wandered in and around Winnipeg in my life, but I've gone beyond a little bit. And now that my older kids are grown, they really wander, you know. And I kind of love that. I really want to teach my kids this idea that we're citizens of the world and that they should be welcome. They're welcome anywhere. I think too often, and you know, Indigenous kids, POC kids, all kinds, like, you know, people of color and moving around the world is sometimes very dangerous. Especially now, there's many places like I would not recommend going that I never thought would be dangerous. But where we can go, we should go. We should wander. We learn so much from one another to just like go into different territories and be good relatives as far as we can. Did I answer your question? Okay, cool.
Oh, wow. And like travel and learn the language and learn about the land, because those are things that teach us of different ways of seeing and understanding. I'm thinking about travel and movement and midshipness and Métis and connection to family too. Because for me, I know my ancestors were some who went south with the medicine line after 1885, and then there was a lot of hiding among some Métis families because it was dangerous to be Métis. And some of my ancestors came back up to Canada later on. My great grandfather, I always picture like just the elements. I picture him kind of coming up with like a fiddle in his lap in a Red River cart, which is maybe to invoke some Métis stereotypes, cultural symbols. And somebody said it was like a wagon. I'm like, I'm sure it was a Red River cart. And he didn't probably play the fiddle until he was a fair bit older, maybe not at 3, but they took scrip in Saskatchewan, and so my great grandparents had, they called it, in the family, they called it the farm. And, they even talked about it as homesteading, but really it was like, I've seen some script documentation about that. But there's a real displacement from the Red River community that like their ancestors came from. And I know for my mother spent most of her life in the city of Calgary, growing up with her Métis family, being proud of their Métis-ness, but kind of keeping it to themselves. And so I always think of my Métis community, it's almost like we had this little island of aunties that was kind of where I started, and then I learned to journey out and meet other Métis and other Indigenous folks. But so it just resonates with what you're saying, with home being in the people and in the relationships, because to me home is I just had the opportunity to gather with some of my cousins and my one auntie when I came in here. They're out here in Ontario now, and that's home to me, is being with those cousins, just being left for 12 hours. That's home. And that's what fills my cup. I'm just reflecting back. That's not a question, but do you want to say anything about that? Because I saw another question.
I had a lot. Anyway, I was picturing the Red River cart and the obvious fiddle. They were probably fiddling as we were crossing the medicine line, digging and jigging as the Red River cart went down that way. Yeah. It's true. That's all I had. I like that addition. Thank you. For my great grandfather's recorded fiddle playing, you can email me and I can look it up where it is for you. It's cool hearing that over the years. Okay, so before we end our dialogue today, we do have to talk about the theme of race shifting or pretendians. This book I found was something that I kind of needed. I often, my reaction when I hear that someone has been kind of discovered as not being Indigenous is always, I just feel sick. I feel sick. There's a real discomfort to this topic, but it's such an important one. And I remember 10 years ago when we had our conversation that's now in the book, you said that, I remember listening to you saying that you think it's really important not to write outside of our positionality experience, that you're very careful about what stories you tell, because you don't think it's your place to tell other people's stories. And when I read this book, I was like, okay, she's really nailed it in terms of just kind of, on the one hand, showing the layered complexity of how this can come to be, and all of the webs of relationality that get pulled when someone, decides to tell a story that's not theirs, essentially. But also at the harm that can be caused to many people. But also, again, it's not just a good guy, bad guy, simple story either. So I guess, could you just reflect on why you turned to that moment in this way at this time? Sure. I mean, I do really think a lot about the idea of permissions, and particularly any kind of reading I would recommend on this is Eden Robinson's a beautiful book based on a talk she gave. It's called Sasquatch at Home. It's her beautiful face on the cover, and she's doing something with her eye, which is kind of freaking me out because I don't like people doing things with their eyes. But so I'll let her do whatever she wants. But in her traditions, on the West Coast Helsinic and Helsa and Hilsa traditions. They talk a lot about permissions, and it's the idea of like there's certain stories that just don't belong to you, and then there's other stories that you're gifted. And I really relate to that, the articulation of that, because I think there's something very similar that happens in the Chin cultures, definitely around where I'm from, because I have, there's lots of Cree folk and Dakota and Cree and Metis folks and around where I come from. Ceremony, that's the word. In ceremony, my ceremony teachers have been Ojibwe. So my names are Ojibwe, and I introduce myself in Ojibwe. And I'm not Ojibwe, but my teachings come from that. I am the chip. I don't remember to introduce myself into the chip. One day I will. The universe will help me with that at some point. But also I'm also kin to them. Like as Chip people were kin to Anishinaabe. So there is, it's not, and I know, and I thought a lot about that, and I've talked to a lot of elders and a lot of people who are much more knowledgeable than me about that, because I don't want to take up space that is not mine. And I think that we need to be mindful about the space we take up about every aspect of Virginia, especially when it's how we introduce ourselves, especially when it's what stories we take on. Whenever I start a book, one of the first kind of considerations I'm doing is if this belongs to me or not. And if there's something I want to write about it, how can I write about it so that it belongs to me? So I really wanted to talk about race shifting. I really wanted to talk about pretendians, because I think that there's been a lot of talk and a lot of cases and a lot of this and a lot of that. And these conversations seem to always deteriorate into calling outs and calling ins, and someone gets adopted, and then that's great, as if that like just, takes the whole issue away. And then people are angry and people are canceled. And then there's a whole bunch of people that are just like, what's going on? I don't understand. Which I totally understand, because I'm sometimes also they're like, I don't get it. So this is kind of like my 10-year meditations on this topic. I'm immersed into a little family story about intergenerational trauma and effects, because that's kind of my jam. So it was this character, Renee, and she appears in The Strangers, and is mentioned here and there in The Strangers she appears in, and I think she's also mentioned in the Circle. And she's just kind of this person that's kind of laughed at. So a very, very secondary background character in those books, and I kind of wanted to bring her forward. I kind of think about the why, like why someone does that, why someone would pretend to be something they're not. What's the whole psychology about that? All the kind of digging into characters that you might want. And as I was digging into this idea and like this, kind of there's always a definite, she's definitely something that a superior, there's always this idea of superiority. If you're taking from something that doesn't belong to you and you're speaking it with authority about something you're not authoritative about, there's this automatic thinking that you think less about that. And you think you're above that. So it's that idea of what makes someone think that they're superior. And there's an obvious answer to that. We know this, right? White supremacy. White supremacy is the answer for everything. So it was really kind of, but I wanted to get back to that relationality about that. I wanted to make a story that was very, very personal, because so many of these stories are personal. And then at the same time, I wanted to make this story not about this person who's taking up space, but about the people she's taking up space from. So I kind of landed on Lynn and June, who are her daughters, Renee, the Pretendian's daughters, whose stories she literally takes from. And really just talking about how much she's taken from them. It's this kind of like story of that, kind of like the immature parent, the narcissistic parent. I've been through a lot of therapy in the last little while, so I'm really digging into these harm shed topics. let's go how these family dynamics work. I love that. I love how people dance around each other. I love how people mess each other up and how they love each other and how they're imperfect. I really liked here giving the two sisters seemingly opposites, but they're actually incredibly the same. I really love playing with that. Those are the kind of things I like to play with. And yeah, so I didn't want it to just be about the topic, or maybe I wanted to try to be really personal about the topic because I thought that was, that's what I care about, how it affects actual people in the situation and not just the statistics of this, that. And in order to do that, I had to make the story very, very, very specific. And I immediately understood that I could not ever, and this is something you understand whenever you read any book, no book could be one thing or everything about anything. You know, this is one tiny little story about this issue. I think there are so many stories about this issue because it's not just about race shift, and it's about, you know, say with me, white supremacy. So it became not even about that in the end. It became about the, you know, kind of it as an example of, you know, greater things.
Well, I think we're just about out of time, but I think just reflecting on that, one more thing I wanted to say is, you know, the kind of thing of all these topics together is I love how in your writing, like you kind of give me role models of like the aunties I want to be like when I grow up one day. Like I almost hit 50 here, Hanson, but one day maybe I'll be a real person. Like one of the things I noticed in your books is there's these acts of courage that these women at some point, like somebody has to, like to be able to speak to, like imagine like standing up to your own mother and saying, this is not your story to tell and you're causing harm. Like, I'm like, man, I want to be that brave one day. And I think I wanted to reflect back to you like that, you know, you've given me, and I'm sure so many other readers, these goals of like, just how to bring that kind of integrity. Like if kinship is an action, if love is an action, it's a verb, like those kinds of courage that we actually need to be able to kind of just stand up. And it's possible, like you make it look like it's just within reach. Like again, so I keep working on myself and getting my therapy points off Instagram, which is helping me, that I can, that's accessible, that maybe one day I could be as brave as these women who are able to stand up and say those things. So I wanted to thank you for always storing these complex, beautiful, brave characters into the world. So I think we're at, does anyone want to, yeah, Jasmine.
Thank you both so much. We will continue this conversation shortly. We're just going to take a quick 5 to 10 minute break. Sorry, this is really loud. We'll take a quick 5 to 10 minute break. Please help yourself to some refreshments. And Megan, Gayatri, and Irena, can you just go quick wait or stand up? They'll be coming around. As you entered, you were hopefully given cue cards. If not, we'll have some extra in the back. If you have any questions you would like to ask Aubrey or Katherena, if you could please write down your questions on the cue card and hand them to either Irena, Megan, and Gayatri. We will collect those and return again in 5 to 10 minutes for a little Q&A. So the first one is for you, Katherena. What is it about artistry, such as pottery for Lynn in Real Ones, that interests you as a means to story and enact relationality?
These are really good.
Sorry, these are really good cookies. I love peanut butter cookies. I like making my characters do. He brought me cheese? Oh, I need cheese. Oh, God bless the folks who bring people cheese.
I hold your cheese. That affects you as
It's not my cheese.
I know.
So I talked a bit about this afternoon. Like my characters always serve me in different ways. So sometimes they're all like me. As many as they are, they're all like me. And I think we all have to You know, we have to really love and relate to the characters we write and create. But sometimes they're different. In some way, they're different, or they're a choice that's different, or a talent that I don't possess, or you know, that they let their anger fly, they let their gentleness fly, whatever. So I love using art as kind of a metaphor because I can't bead, I can't do pottery, I can't paint. I've had a range of characters who are rangers. I really like characters to do things I can't do. So Lynn's pottery practice is actually modeled after my friend Casey Adams' pottery practice. She's a teacher and a beautiful artist. She also did the cover art for The Strangers and The Circle. You know, just plugging her. She's really embedded in my work. But I kind of started creating the character of Lynn because Casey kept trying to teach me how to do bowls, and I can't do them. And I would kind of make like a rudimentary bowl, and then I'd hand it to her all proud, and then she'd fix it and hand it back to me, and I'd be like, look at what I did. But but I like writing about things and describing things, and I could, you know, and that's kind of how I approach pottery, very kind of abstract way, just by writing about it, because it's such a beautiful process. As is painting, as is all these other things that I have no talent to do. So yeah, Becca and I got. Oh.
Thank you. For Dr. Hanson, why do you think fiction is especially fruitful in education pedagogy?
Oh, I love that question. And I also just have to respond to Katherena talking about all the things she doesn't have talent at with her 18 published books, award-winning authorship. I think you found what you're good at least one thing, plus karaoke to be determined. Why is fiction so fruitful in education pedagogy? My kind of tagline for this, I feel like I should have shirts made, is starting with story. And one of the things I know about story in Indigenous knowledge systems, and this is something I'm just starting to learn about, I'm a very humble learner when it comes to oral knowledge systems, but that when a story is told, a relationship opens up between the storyteller, and the listener. And like we've talked about today, relationships call for responsibility. So when I am in a relationship, if I'm brought into relation as kin with someone or something, a being, a story, I've heard many of my teachers say stories have spirit. So if I'm brought into relationship, that means I have responsibility. So I love story as a teacher, certainly, as something that kind of entices us into learning, but also there's this really structural, logical, mathematical piece that happens there where it's we are now in this web of interconnection and obligation where I kind of need to figure out how I'm going to enact that responsibility now that I've heard this story. So I love that for myself as a learner and as a teacher, is that if I hear a story and it confronts me with things I don't know, or if it brings me into reflecting on the world in a new way, or even if it just validates things that I thought I already knew, I have a responsibility to act, maybe to share, maybe to hold that story for the appropriate time. It depends on the story, but there is a responsibility there that is that calls me into something. And I think that's a beautiful ethic for teaching, because isn't that, so much of what education is about? Here we are, I've taught a lot of grade 10-2 English, say. And, when I'm in a room with a whole bunch of 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, I've taught a lot of kids who are taking English, grade 10 English for the second or third time. They're not there to be kind of explained that, why literary merit is important for their lives. They're there to, some of them have not felt welcome in educational spaces. But if we can, if I can kind of bring them along with a story that gives them a reason to live their life in a particular way, or that shows them a sense of possibility about who they could be, or that maybe helps them figure things out that matter to their real lives, which I think so much of story can do. And I know that's been true for me. So I just really love opening up spaces where people can kind of find their way to be storied into the world. But certainly like most of the work I do is teaching teachers who kind of have been given this official mandate to teach and, to learn and teach in the area of Indigenous education. And why wouldn't you start with story? There's so much beautiful Indigenous literature being created all the time. That's a beautiful way to learn, right? So I can talk about that all night, but I'll pass the mic back to Jasmine. Oh.
And then I'm gonna go back. The light is like right in my eye.
We're just being.
Okay, I have a really spicy question, but where did I put it? Yes. Okay. If Real Ones was adopted for the big screen, who would you want to play Renee?
That is a great question. I have a great answer. I have been and feedback. Because we did the audiobooks for Real Ones, and it was the first time I got to be a voice actor on the audiobook, and it was my favorite job in the whole wide world. I just want to like record my reading of things for the rest of everything. But the person we got to play Renee and the Real Ones was Sheila McCarthy. And so Sheila McCarthy, we know, we got some knowledge. Like she was from Little Mosque on the Prairie. She was in Women Talking. And the reason I had to get her to play Renee, and she also played Auntie Dell, who was the other Renee's sister in the book, is because Women Talking, we know this, right? The brilliant novel by Miriam Toews, adapted by Sarah Polley, who is an equally amazing human. And of course, when all the minnows, short for Mennonite, saw Women Talking, they had lots to say because they always do. And my mom's impression, and apparently all the aunties' impression, was that the only one who knew how to do the accent right was Sheila McCarthy. And so that's why she had to be Renee and Auntie Dell. So if there ever was a movie, which I know there would be, but if there was, yeah, Sheila McCarthy would kill it.
This one is also for Katherena. Did you? I'm just gonna shop. I'll hold it right. Thank you. Oh, it's you. You're magnetic.
She's magnetic personality.
No, I think you do. Did you decide that you wanted to write Real Ones when you started writing the brand? I think you kind of alluded to this, the lady.
Okay. So the question, did I decide to write Real Ones when I wrote the break? I no. No. I kind of see. I talked about this earlier. The Break was originally a short story collection, and those short stories ended up kind of being broken apart and build out the 3 books. So The Break, The Strangers, and The Circle, which really have their own. They each are their independent stories in an interconnected universe, not a trilogy. They're standalones, supposedly, but they do follow an arc, a chronological one at that, so it's real investment. But they all kind of fit together. I did talk about like Renee and June and Lynn as very secondary characters because as I was writing The Strangers, not only the book, but it's a family. And I did see and do see kind of like this greater story with all of those people. So Lynn and June are connected to the strangers relationally. They're also strangers. But I didn't quite see like all of their story. I just knew that they were interesting people I wanted to pick up. In The Strangers, they were just kind of like these secondary background characters that Cedar, the main character, The Strangers, kind of discovers. And they were really there in that book to give Cedar kind of aspirational goals because there was a mature artist, here was a mature professor. Like, aren't these amazing things that she can do? These people might be her relatives, would that be amazing? And then, in The Real Ones is a story kind of came from many places, but from there. So I didn't quite, it was also a surprise because it became meditation of all these things that were like popping up in my life. So it was more of a surprise than the other three for sure. Oh, right, my neck.
That's amazing.
I have, the next question is going to be for you because I selfishly am just going to ask a question. So I'm really interested in who you were reading and who inspired you. Because I have an idea, perhaps, but yeah, I'd love to.
Of who I was reading, it was inspired. Okay, I'm interested now, but I think you want to hear my answers first. Most instrumental book of my childhood. See, I was very lucky. I didn't have to wait until university to be exposed to Indigenous lit. In Winnipeg and in Canada, we had a beautiful writer called Beatrice Colton-Mosnier, who wrote the book In Search of April Rain Tree in 1982. That was a phenomenal, well, it's a phenomenal book, and it was a national bestseller everywhere. But it was really big in Winnipeg at the time, specifically. Like, I remember my stepfather was in university at the time, and he brought it home. And it was something that everyone read because it was not only our town, it was another Mission person. It was all the things, and it checked all these boxes for me and really gave me a path. And then, of course, there was also at that time, there was the memoir by Maria Campbell Pathbury, which I stumbled upon at the library because I was that kind of kid. So those two books gave me away, and I knew that it could happen. As I grew up and really thinking in terms of like the interconnected universe of the novels, I was very, very inspired by Louise Erdrich, who does very similar things, kind of picking up characters with different points of genealogy. Richard Van Camp was a brilliant early mentor and also like an inspiration in how he can do really heavy things, but also it had put so much laughter in him. Yeah, it was. When I was a young person, I was younger. I didn't want young anymore. When I was kind of coming up in the writing world, I had the pleasure of being a part of the Indigenous Writers Collective and reading all of those folks and just having amazing mentors. So those mentors were Rosanna Deerchild, Jordan Mueller, and Duncan McCurdy. All of them I would very, very highly recommend. So those were the ones I was reading. Who'd you take?
Beatrice.
Beatrice?
Yeah, it just something that you said, and I was thinking about like the way the characters, I think I shared this at the lunch and learn, like your characters keep coming back to you, right? It's like in different ways. You see them or you feel it. And it's the same with April and Cheryl, right? I mean, I even seen different pieces of April and Cheryl like in my own children, right? And like, so yeah, I see that.
And I think too, like I always do that dual sister thing. I always do it. And I don't have a sister. I have an adopted sister, adopted by ceremony, who's a Swain, who's the one who's probably your cousin, right? But I don't have a sister, but I have like Lou and Hall are sisters, Lynn and June are sisters, and Cheryl in the break. Okay, this was the Cheryl in the break is Cheryl, and then Lorraine is her sister. So Cheryl is named after Cheryl in Search of April Rain Tree. And I didn't like the name April, so I gave Rain a different name.
Can everyone hear me if I just shout? Okay, so there was this is for you. And I'm kind of combining a couple. So this is a teacher question. And so thinking about that, like, what does it mean to be a good relative? How, as a non-Indigenous educator, they're wondering how they can be a good relative when it comes to teaching Indigenous. Sorry, I'm not shouting, am I? Okay, repeating my question. Teaching Indigenous literatures and stories.
How do we be, as a non-Indigenous educator, how can I be a good relative teaching Indigenous literature and stories? I love that question. And I would say, like, if you're here, you're already doing one of the things, which is like to show up, listen, participate. And I mean, I think like different cultures have different teachings around like what does it mean to be a good relative. Like if you go to somebody's house, you bring something, or you like help do dishes, or you, like you take care of your older relatives, or you like there's all different kinds of things that our cultures teach us if we just kind of sit with those. That can be like really great beginning places to guide us. Like I love it when people learn about their own cultural backgrounds and kind of go, wait, like what would my grandmother want me to do? And take that as an ethic. Like I think that could be a really lovely starting place. I always like I teach like I would say 90% non-Indigenous teachers all the time. It's one of my favorite things to do. I often just really give that advice of to stay curious and to find your own path into the learning. So like if you're a secondary science teacher, what is your pathway to that? Maybe it's the land, maybe it's getting outdoors, maybe it's finding Leroy Little Bear's YouTube videos. We're talking about Leroy less recently. Like he's gonna be talking to you about astrophysics and Blackfoot science. Like there's something for everyone out there. And I think just like going to like certainly, people often get the advice of like show up and listen at Indigenous community events. And I think like that's a really beautiful practice. But also I think finding our own way to get involved and step up. And, if you're a teacher, I think like often the way into that is to say, okay, well, what can I be doing in my own classroom? And if, I sometimes have like someone who's like, okay, well, I'm secondary chemistry and it just doesn't seem like the easiest way for me. And I'm like, okay, but wait, are you teaching human beings? Because sometimes it's actually in how we have the relationships in our classroom that can be that space. So maybe the curriculum content isn't the easiest for you. Like if you're like majority social studies, it's going to be easier. But there are really beautiful ways that we can open up relational spaces in the classroom and with the kids, like getting to know them, making sure their voices belong, making sure that a diversity of perspectives is welcome in the classroom. And I think there's always, that invitation to learn, like Indigenous knowledge systems were whole entire systems before colonization. So there is knowledge about whatever it is in the system, in the knowledge systems of the land that we're living on. So finding ways to build relationships with traditional knowledge systems is really beautiful opportunity. Maybe your school district has elders or Indigenous knowledge teams that you can connect with. But there's usually kind of a pathway to that now. I find that especially the bigger school jurisdictions have that. I am from Alberta, so it's a slightly different context. But, maybe there's work that can be done collaboratively. And I know one of my mentors always said, like, don't work alone. So the more hands we can kind of link in the work, I think can help us to do the work in a good way so that we're not kind of doing it on our own. And there's a lot I could say about that, but I think if you're already here and you're curious and you're thinking about it, just, stay active and in that curious relational spirit, it's going to lead you to good things. Is that a good answer?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Great.
I'm not sure how we are for time, but if you what time is it? Like 14. Feels more just like in one more question.
Sorry.
And not beating that.
My question for kind of tying into what you were talking about, we do have a lot of non-Indigenous educators in the room, so we have a lot of similar questions in that regard about advice for non-Indigenous educators, and thank you for what you shared, Aubrey. My question for you, Katherena, is for the non-Indigenous educators in the room that are possibly teaching the break or any of your other works. Is there anything that you would like, well, not just non-Indigenous educators, but educators in general to know or to keep in mind with the ways in which they're presenting your work?
It's always a harder question because I do not like to prescribe takeaways from what I'm writing, because I think it's always more important in all art what people are taking away. And I do really believe in the adage, you see the world as you are, not how it actually is. So what people's takeaway from the break is, can be what it is. And often I find it's really interesting when we read these kind of books that can be difficult, these kind of books that can be outside our own experience. It's sometimes the most interesting part is how strong reactions or non-strong reaction, like what people's emotional reaction is to the book and what that says about their belief system and what they're carried into the work. And I think that's maybe where I would think would be kind of a point of inquiry, as the educators say. Because I do think it's important to challenge those concepts. And I think that the things that I'm talking about are at one point, it's back to what I was saying before, that idea of just like seeing better and digging deeper and going forward. And I've often over the years gotten the kind of a variation on the oh, you talk so good, which I appreciate, but how did you think I would talk? Or the oh, I saw you made me see humans. And my question back to that is, well, what did you think they were? Because we so often see these things, and this is true of all different kinds of people that we see on the news, and any kind of time people are made into statistics, that we don't see their humanity, and we don't see how similar we are. And sometimes that's always a good place to start, is how we're similar, it's our way in. And that often feels like that kind of point to carry, but to understand that, yeah, we're seeing who we are all the time. And I always want to add, and I was thinking when you were talking, Indigenous education is not just for Indigenous kids. It's a beautiful point that Indigenous kids get to see themselves reflected in the education they're provided. That's awesome. So many of us didn't see that, but it's not just for those kids. It's for all the non-Indigenous kids too. Learning and teaching the proper history of this place involves an Indigenous education, full stop. We are an Indigenous nation, filled with many Indigenous nations. So it's not just for one thing. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful and magical. And my honor is that I get to show kids themselves, and they can see their cousins and their aunties, and they can see how powerful they are. That's awesome. That's who I write for. That's why I get up in the morning. But it's also to show that humanity to people who didn't see it before. That's what we're here for.
So I just wanted to take a moment to have everyone from the Indigenous Literatures Lab who's here to stand up. Jasmine, Gayatri, Katherena, and Megan. And I just wanted to thank you all, but also just a plug. We actually presented at ILSA and have been working on a paper that is about the spirit and intent of Katherena Vermette's 3 books that are not a trilogy. And so I was thinking about it in response to that question as well, right? Like how, do non-Indigenous educators really ensure that they're honoring the spirit and intent of the text? And so we shared about that. And we will share that on the Indigenous Literatures Lab website once it's published as well. But it's also about thinking about doing this work from a way that really embraces Indigenous brilliance from a strength-based lens, right? Because we have witnessed in the work that we're doing, teachers take some of these texts and really present them in an efficiency way that doesn't support the cultural safety of Indigenous students or any student in the classrooms. I just wanted to share that. And as we were wrapping up, I'm just going to call Gayatri up.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Yeah, you're like, oh,
Sorry. So I just wanted to thank our lovely panelists and our moderators for tonight's event. If we could give them another round of applause. I also wanted to share some upcoming events that we've made some references to. So in collaboration with another storybook shop, again, and Page 2 Books, we are pleased to present Ally is a Verb, a guide to reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, which is written by Rose LeMay. And it'll be in conversation with acclaimed author and journalist Tanya Talaga on Tuesday, April 29th at the Oise Library. So if you signed up for our mailing list, we will share another plug about it. And so you'll get some details about how to register. It is a free event again. We do have a book club that was made reference to, and this big spring gathering of our seasonal book club will take place on May 29th, where we will be reading and discussing the Miracles Raven Song. I know folks have shared that, they don't like coming if they haven't read the book, but we just really love having really great conversations like tonight. So if you don't mind spoilers and you want to come for conversation, we strongly encourage everybody to attend. And then finally, another speaker series event will take place on June 4th. It's with Dr. Amy Farrell from the University of Manitoba and Dr. Joaquin Muniz from the University of British Columbia. And their conversation will explore, again, similar themes to today, working with Indigenous young adult literatures and storytelling in contemporary contexts. So again, make sure you sign up for our mailing list. We also have a plug for our social media and our website. And yes, thank you so much again, Dr. Aubrey Jean Hanson, Katherena Vermette, our moderators, Jasmine and Dr. Brandt, and Grandmother Shirley for our wonderful opening. Our guests have graciously agreed to sign copies of their books, and they can be found right now. They're in the back, but we're going to move the table up to the front. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Have a wonderful evening.